They say the Silk Road will make you rich or kill you. For you, it was both. And it started with a guy sitting at your fire who didn't even ask for an invite. The color of the dust tells you how long since the last caravan passed. A bent reed at a watering hole means someone was here recently and left in a hurry. The way a camel pins its ears tells you the wind is about to shift before the wind knows it. You don't know when you learned these things. You just know them. The way a man knows his own hands in the dark. You've been doing this since you were old enough to walk behind your father's caravan without complaining. You've made the Eastern Crossing 11 times. You've talked your way through garrison checkpoints, navigated mountain passes that flood in spring and freeze in autumn, and once, convinced a bandit chief that your entire column of goods was cursed by a wandering holy man and that touching any of it would cause his teeth to fall out. He let you through. His teeth were already bad, which helped. The point is, you know this road. You know it better than anyone working it right now. You know which routes flood, which ones freeze, which border inspectors will take silver and which ones prefer to be flattered. You know which merchants lie about weight and which ones lie about destination. You know, within half a day, how far any caravan in front of you is moving, just from the marks they leave in the dust. This is not a small thing to know. Out here, it is everything. Which is exactly why, on the night before your 12th crossing, a man you've never seen before sits down at your fire without being invited. He is not a merchant. You know a merchant the moment they sit down. They're always calculating, always doing quiet arithmetic, eyes moving over everything to assign it a value. This man watches people, not goods. People. There is a difference, and it matters. He's dressed well. He's carrying no goods, no bundles, no pack animals. Just a chest, small, lacquered black, iron fittings, which he sets beside him on the ground like it's a sleeping child. He tells you he needs passage east. He says the chest is personal, not for trade. You tell him your column is for merchants with goods to sell. You don't carry passengers. He opens his robe and lays 3 silver coins on the ground between you, slowly, one at a time. Each one catches the firelight. You look at the silver. You look at the chest. You look at his hands. Steady. The hands of a man who has laid silvers on tables before and watched people make decisions. You ask how far east. He names a city 6 weeks out, if the northern pass is clear. Your standard rate is 1 coin for a full crossing. He has laid 3. You understand what the extra 2 are for. You should say no. And here's the thing. You would have, 6 months ago. But 6 months ago, you hadn't lost everything on the 11th crossing. You'd hired extra guards because the eastern corridor had gotten dangerous. A new warlord pushing through the trade routes. Extra guards cost money. The alternate path cost time. And time, on the road, is money in someone else's pocket. By the time your column reached its destination, the merchant you were carrying for, a heavy-set man from the west, with cold eyes and a habit of picking his teeth with a silver knife, had recalculated your fee. He said you owed him for the delay. You didn't. The contract said otherwise, but the heavy-set man had friends back home, and your mother was still back home, and he mentioned her by name, so you paid him. You came back thin. In this business, when a caravan leader comes back thin, people start wondering what happened out there. Your reputation has a small crack in it now. Not a break, just a crack. But cracks spread, and you've seen what happens to men whose cracks spread too far. They end up taking whatever job sits down at their fire, no matter how little they like the look of it. You swore you'd never be one of those men. You pick up the 3 coins. You tell the man he sleeps at the rear of the column, walks his own animal, and asks no questions about how you run your caravan. He doesn't argue. He doesn't thank you. He simply picks up the black chest and carries it back toward the edge of camp, quiet as smoke. You sit with the coins in your hand for a long time, listening to the camels settle for the night and the distant sound of men playing dice around the cook's fire, laughing at something you can't hear. One quiet man with a sealed chest. That's all this is. You've carried stranger cargo. 2 years ago, you transported a merchant's elderly mother in a litter the whole length of the route, and she spent every day of it criticizing the quality of the dust. A sealed chest that doesn't complain is practically a luxury. You tell yourself it's a small thing. The first 2 weeks are easy, easier than they should be, looking back. The man is a model traveler, wakes before everyone, waters his own animal without being asked, eats without complaint, never speaks to the other merchants, never causes trouble with them either. He is simply present at the back of the column, quiet, carrying the black chest like it weighs nothing, disappearing into the rhythm of the road the way a single note disappears into music when enough other notes are playing. You almost forget he's there, which is, you'll understand much later, precisely what he intended. The crossing itself goes well for the first stretch. Good weather. The northern pass is clear, just as you predicted. The merchants in your column are the easy kind, Men with legitimate goods and no particular interest in making trouble. Happy to follow your pace and sleep when you say sleep. One of them, a portly fabric trader who sweats regardless of the temperature, has taken to asking you each morning whether today will be a difficult day or an easy day. You've been telling him easy since day 3. He seems to find this enormously reassuring. You're not sure why you keep saying it. Then you reach the first garrison crossing. You know the inspector here. You've crossed this post 8 times. He's a man who has a weakness for strong wine and very little interest in doing his job thoroughly, as long as certain courtesies are observed. You ride ahead, spend 20 minutes with him, drink his wine, talk about the road conditions north, and leave a small leather pouch on his table when you stand to go. Standard practice. He waves the column through without looking up. Then he looks up. He sees the chest. He goes still. Not alarmed exactly, but careful in a way he wasn't a moment ago. The way a man goes careful when he's been told to watch for something and thinks maybe he's just seen it. His eyes move from the chest to the man carrying it, then to you. And the question hasn't formed on his lips yet, but you can already see it coming. You step between him and the chest before you've decided to. You tell him it's personal effects, a gift for a relative down the road, some clothing, a few sentimental items of no particular value. He looks at you. He looks at the chest. He looks at you again. You hold his gaze and say nothing, and let the silence do the work that honesty couldn't. He waves you through. That night you go to the man's fire and tell him, without raising your voice, that you need to know if there are going to be more moments like that one. Because the next garrison post is run by a man who doesn't drink wine, doesn't accept courtesies, and has a reputation for opening every crate, every bundle, and every sealed container that passes through his post just on principle. If he decides to look inside that chest, there is nothing you can do about it. The man looks at you for a long moment. His face gives nothing. Then he reaches into his robe and places a 4th coin on the ground between you. You walk back to your fire. You tell yourself you answered a question the inspector didn't actually ask. You said clothing, sentimental items. You don't actually know that those things aren't in the chest. That part, at least, is technically true. Technically true. That's the phrase that should worry you. That's the phrase men use right before they stop asking questions altogether. When the answers have gotten inconvenient and the coins have gotten comfortable and the gap between what you know and what you're willing to know has quietly become a policy, you stop asking. That's the first mistake, not taking the silver. Telling yourself the silver and the mistake were different things. 3 weeks out, your quietest guard comes to you before sunrise. He's young, good with horses, steady in a crisis, the kind of man you're glad to have when things go sideways. You hired him 2 crossings ago on a recommendation, and he's never given you a reason to regret it. He's not the type to bring you problems unless they're real. He tells you that 2 nights ago, a rider came out of the dark at the edge of camp, spoke briefly with the man at the back of the column, and disappeared again just as quickly. The man sent a reply tucked into the rider's boot. You ask what the message said. He says he couldn't get close enough. You thank him. You tell him to keep watching. You tell him to say nothing to anyone. You ride that whole day with the man's profile at the edge of your vision. A polite man. A quiet man. A man who receives riders in the night and sends messages in boots. Who paid 3 coins to not be questioned and a 4th to not be pressured at a crossing. Who carries a chest that makes garrison inspectors go still and careful. You do the arithmetic. You've been on this road long enough to know what kind of arithmetic this is, what kind of man does business this way, and what happens to the people around that kind of man when the business goes wrong. You are 3 weeks out, past the garrison. You've already stepped in front of an inspector and said words that were not technically lies, but were not, in any honest accounting, the truth. Turning back now means returning the coins. It means arriving home empty-handed again. Your mother. The physician bills that have been piling on the table at the back of your mind since the 11th crossing. The crack in your reputation that is already spreading whether you do anything about it or not. You think about going to the man that night and telling him you know about the rider, laying it out plainly, that you're not blind, that you understand something complicated is moving through your caravan, and that if it puts your people at risk, you'll leave him at the next settlement with his chest and his coins and his midnight correspondence and let someone else carry his problems the rest of the way. You rehearse the words while you ride. They sound reasonable. They sound like the right thing. You don't say them. You keep riding east. Here's the thing about the deep desert that nobody tells you until it's too late to turn around. The danger isn't the heat, or the water running out, or the way the landmarks shift when the wind rearranges the dunes overnight. All of that is manageable if you know the road. And you know the road. The danger is what the desert does to noise. 3 days in, everything quiets. The debt, your mother, the coins, the chest, the midnight rider, the inspector's careful eyes, all of it drops away. There is only the sand, the stars, the column of animals stretched out behind you, and the route running through you like a river knows its bed. You move at night and rest by day. The world shrinks to the next watering point, the next bearing, the sound of the lead camel's feet on the ground. The desert empties you out, and for a few days it is the closest thing to peace you have felt in months. You remember why you started doing this. You remember what the road felt like before it became a problem to be solved. That peace is the trap, because when everything is quiet you stop listening. The young guard disappears on the fourth night, not killed. His water is gone, his animal is gone, and there's a section of rope cut clean near where he slept. In the morning there is simply the empty space where he used to be, and the marks of hooves heading north, away from the route, already half filled by the overnight wind. You tell the column he left in the night. Family trouble. It happens. You don't say what you're actually thinking, that he was never watching for you, that the midnight rider wasn't delivering messages to the man, he was receiving them, that the young guard was placed in your column before you ever left, placed by whoever wants the chest stop before it reaches its destination, and that when they got everything they needed from him, they pulled him out before the desert could complicate things. And now, somewhere to the north, someone knows exactly where you are, exactly what route you're taking, and exactly how many men you have left. You go to the man that night. You sit down at his fire without being invited, the way he sat at yours 7 weeks ago, and you tell him you know the guard was not yours. You tell him you know someone is tracking this column. You tell him you want the truth about what you're carrying, because if armed men come out of the dark for that chest, your other guards will be in the way and they have families and they didn't sign on for whatever this is. He looks at you for a long time. Then he tells you the chest carries correspondence, political letters between powerful men, an arrangement of shared interests that certain other parties have spent considerable money trying to prevent. The rider was one of those parties. The guard was feeding them your route, your pace, your numbers. You ask why they haven't moved on the column yet. He says the desert is a difficult place to stage an ambush when you don't know it. He looks at you steadily. He says that's why he needed you specifically. It lands exactly the way it should. You were not chosen because you were available. You were chosen because you are the best, and the best is the only thing that was going to get this chest through. And here you are, 6 weeks in, responsible for 22 other people, in the middle of a desert that only you know well enough to navigate, with armed men somewhere to the north waiting for you to make a mistake. You ride point, you read the road, you do not sleep more than a few hours at a stretch. You bring the column through the deep desert in 11 days. No losses, except the guard, who was never really yours. The city at the end of the crossing is exactly what you need it to be after 11 days in the sand. Noise, food, the smell of water and animals and fires burning with actual wood. Every person passing through has the look of someone who has recently survived something and would rather not discuss it. The man leads you to a house in the merchant's quarter. Inside, 3 men are waiting. You don't know their faces. You know the quality of their stillness. Men paid to stay quiet in rooms and make other people feel the weight of their patience. One of them takes the chest, opens it, removes a bundle of letters and passes them to the man in the center. He reads. He nods. He speaks briefly, then turns to you and says, "Your payment is waiting." He places a bag on the table. You open it. More silver than the last 3 crossings combined. Enough to clear the debt, cover your mother's physicians for years, walk into your next contract from a position of strength instead of desperation. You look at the bag. You don't pick it up. You ask what the letters arranged. The man who brought you here looks at you with something like respect, the first honest expression you've seen on his face since the fire outside the city 7 weeks ago. He tells you the letters arranged for a governor further east to stand aside, to let certain goods pass through his territory without inspection, in exchange for considerations he found agreeable. You ask what goods. He says that isn't your concern. You understand then, without needing it explained. The letters weren't the cargo. They were the door. Your crossing, your route, your relationships at the garrison posts, your ability to move a column through the deep desert without losing a single animal even with armed men tracking you from the north, was never the job itself. It was the audition. Someone needed to know it could be done. Now they know. You pick up the bag. It is heavier than you expected. The man in the center speaks again. He says there will be a second crossing, 4 months from now. He says a man of your particular abilities, the kind who can read an inspector's hesitation before it becomes a question, who can navigate in the dark by instinct, who can keep 22 people alive in the desert with strangers hunting them and still deliver the cargo clean, is not a man they will simply pay and release. Then he says your mother's name. You go very still. He says she is being well cared for, that a physician has been visiting her regularly for the past 2 months, that she asked after you, and he made sure to tell her you were doing well and would be home soon. He says all of this simply, informatively, The way you'd describe the weather to someone who asked. You look at the man who sat at your fire 7 weeks ago. He looks at the floor. You ask when you leave for the second crossing. The man in the center tells you there is a house here where you'll stay until then. Comfortable, good food, everything you need. He says it the way a man describes a room he's described many times before, to many different people who ask the same question you just asked. He doesn't say what happens if you try to leave. He doesn't need to. That night you stand on the roof of the house. The stars over the desert are the same stars you've navigated by for 20 years. You know exactly where you are. You know exactly which direction the road home runs. You know every watering point, every garrison post, every inspector and what he takes and how much. You think about what it would take to walk out the front door and disappear into this city tonight, find a westbound column, and be back across the desert before anyone could follow. You know the road. You know it better than the men who are watching this house know it. You could do it, except your mother is home. And the people who described her physician's visits in the tone of a man discussing the weather are the same people whose rider tracked your column through the deep desert for 11 days, and you are not confused about what that combination of facts means. The road between here and home is in your body. You have always known it. For your whole life, it was the one thing that was entirely yours. The one skill that made you free, that made you valuable on your own terms, that meant you could always choose your next step. You used to read the road. You used to choose the route. You spent your whole life learning to navigate. Now you are the route.